Hello. Conops and I have decided to do this stream, and I'm just waiting for him to come. We have finished the Luke Ford stream when he was talking about humiliation. And previously he was talking about likability. So obviously he has a few issues that he wants to discuss. It is a kind of public therapy, I suppose. It's curious in that, on the one hand, he seems to know what's wrong, but his behavior suggests he doesn't. I don't know, it's very strange. I can't quite describe it. It's like when somebody says the right words, but his actions don't quite make sense with his behavior. It's like somebody maybe saying no thank you, but reaching out to take the thing that you're offering him. Cognitive dissonance, I suppose, is the best way of putting it. So on the one hand, you think, oh yes, this person has done all these things in order to escape from his former life, but he keeps you think he wishes to dissociate himself from, but he always mentions his former life as if he doesn't want to get he still wants it to be very much a part of him and to be associated with him. So I mean, supposing if I were a drug addict, and I just wanted to get over this thing about being a drug addict. I mean, I don't want to be a drug addict, so I won't keep talking about it and say to people, hey, I'm a drug addict, look at me, but I'm better now, and then blah, 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 blah. Hey, I'm a drug addict. So it doesn't quite make sense to me. So I guess there must be some underlying psychological issue. So if you go to the trouble of converting to Judaism, then I guess you would expect that person to talk about Jewish things and be Jewish and whatever, but instead Luke is reaching out to people who don't like Jews, who he is sort of representing as. It's a kind of double bluff. I don't know. So on the one hand, it's you want something yet you don't want it, and you want it and you don't want it, and I don't know. I think most people now are mentally ill anyway. And this means that, whatever they do will make no sense at all, because you can't expect the mentally ill to accept the truth, act upon it, or exercise logic and act on it. So, and of course, we live in an age where truth is rejected and logic denied. And you can't really tell people that they're wrong, because they either don't get it, or they won't listen, or they'll tell you that there's something wrong with you just for thinking the way you do. And, and you're left with, but it's true and it makes sense. And it's like, they say, oh, but I don't like it. So We live in a very feminine age where people just don't know their minds, including men. So they have, contradictory statements that they won't acknowledge is contradictory. They, they just do strange, crazy things. But perhaps it doesn't matter. It's all display anyway, isn't it? It's all, look at me, look at me. And then you ask yourself if there's a purpose to it, and there isn't. Because people are living from day to day. They're not thinking about the future, because if they were thinking about the future, they would have got a job, a long-term partner, the fruits of the union of their long-term relationship, that is marriage. And I think it's a kind of a sense of worthlessness. So on the one hand, they would like to be valued and important, which is why they want people to look at them all the time. On the other hand, they also realize that what they're doing is futile, and so they can't take themselves seriously, and they don't really want anything they say to be acted on. They don't even want to be. They don't even want to make sense. So you listen to these conversations and you think, what was that about? Why did they say what they said? And what did it even mean? Because it didn't mean anything. It was just a whole bunch of words. I mean, yes, you can get a kind of a story out of it, but there would be no purpose to it. So if you listen to the Luke Ford stream, the one that we all came from, you will find that there was a whole bunch of people. I mean, some people tried to say comforting things, and you heard other people who, pill eater. What? So I guess he just took that as an opportunity to display himself and tell us the latest degenerate sexual encounter that he indulged in, and that was the purpose. So to boast about one's sexual encounters is a kind of ostentatious display. This is something I've also noticed with Luke, that he's always talking about some sexual experience, almost as if it's like, well, I might not have much, but I have these memories of these failed relationships, and I'll tell them to you again, and I've got so many. So, Connops, are you joining me or not? Or do you just want me to ramble on? Vulgarity. Whose vulgarity? My vulgarity? Somebody else's vulgarity, Glib? Well, I suppose for men who have nothing, then all they can boast about is their many different kinds of sex that they have had with many different kinds of women, because they can't show off their car, their children, their wife. Then it's their memories of their empty encounters. And that's why they just don't seem to make any sense. I mean, Pill Eater, I've actually spoken to him, but the stream is gone. And that's the thing with talking to temporary people. They don't want anything they say to be on record, or it can't be on record for some particular reason because they're going to get into trouble. They don't care if it doesn't stay on record. They want to erase it later anyway. It's almost as if they want to not leave a mark. Well, I don't know. I think I try to be logical about these things. It's like, well, if I'm in the business of political activism, then I do want my streams to stay up. Because, well, otherwise you'll just have wasted your time. You won't have persuaded anyone because you're just talking to marginalized people anyway when you're on your streams. And even the bigger channels are just talking to people who will never amount to anything, who can be safely ignored because they obviously deserve to suffer because they serve no particular purpose. And there are so many of them, so many of us, I suppose. It's almost as if the government kind of knows what it's done and they don't want to acknowledge that. It's like, some man who goes around pumping and dumping, sluts, and they get pregnant. He never knows whether, about the bastard children that he's had, and he doesn't want to meet them, and he certainly doesn't want to have to pay for them. So I guess he would never be acknowledging any of it, of any bastard children he's had, and he won't even remember the women he screwed. So and I think this is what the government is doing. It doesn't want to acknowledge us or what it's done to such a large section. Well, it seems a very large section to me, but then that's because I bump along at the bottom with you. Is Richard Censor a degenerate? Henry Claymore asks. I would say so, simply because he's known for his lack of sexual fidelity to his ex-wife. I'm sure many women throw themselves at him, and he won't be able to resist. He's well known for having sex with his comrades, I suppose you could call them. So that's not a good way of operating, but I guess most men can't say no. And of course that messes up everything. Because then all your political associates whose women you have screwed just won't be able to work with you. But I think one of the problems of marginalized people is that they can't think in the long term. They're just not thinking in that way. Hello, Conops, can you hear us?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. We don't even have an avatar now. You're just.
I can make one. You can actually choose one if you want. Let me see. What about? Hey, shit! All my avatars are gone. Is it? No. My computer's fucking a bit.
You're just a black square.
Now better. This one. You want this one?
I prefer the second one. I've seen them before. But I think the moving ones are a bit distracting.
Yes. Oh, this one has titties. Oops, sorry. So I just pick one.
Yeah,
And
just
then we
pick
can.
one. You tend to switch
Yes.
them anyway, don't you?
Yes.
When you get bored with them.
I do. I do. What about this one? Do you think it's triggering enough, or do you think?
Oh dear.
I made these ones specifically for Wignats. I hope they're not too bothered about it. But maybe I should get one that is a bit more plain. I think I should get more plain one. What do you think?
I think get a plain one so people will take what you say more seriously.
Ah,
I
all
know
right,
you quite like that one.
I like this one.
Mm.
But yeah, good question. Do people actually want to change something, or they just want to be in a movement and pretending to change things? And I think for a lot of people, it's the latter.
They just want people to hang out with, in their lonely, pathetic lives, I suppose. Because it's cheaper to stay at home rather than go out and meet people.
Yeah, that's true. It's also less anxiety, I would suspect, less effort in general. And also, you can always go to another pocket if you're not welcome, right? So it's quite easy contact. You can always protect yourself emotionally. Like, I didn't like these people anyway. I didn't invest. It's all about politics. So, yeah, there's probably a lot of social needs. Jenny said that too, that people gather here for social needs. I'm not sure I actually do. Do you?
I mean, I know that people do. So, eventually, there probably have been times when I was feeling bored and didn't have anything much to say, and you just want to, be able to interact with people who seem to be taking on board what you're saying. So, I mean, I try to avoid that because it will be a bit sad if you're just sort of streaming in order to, you know, have a bit of company. But that can easily happen.
Yeah, I can imagine. Also for me, like I have a few hours to kill now, and it's literally 3:21 in the night. So yeah, it's probably better not to call a friend, you know?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But sometimes you think, maybe I should read a book. At least it's more intelligent. You might learn something rather than the same old, same old. I don't know. I mean, these days I'm afraid I read very little now.
Yeah, I have the same problem. Although, because of our last discussion, I was be reading some of the passages of the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides.
Oh right, good.
So sometimes it triggers an interest. But
Would you like to read us some choice bits that you think we could benefit educationally from?
no.
Okay. Okay.
No, it's more that like if I look for the passage, I get the book again, and I'm also on my computer and not in the, how would you say, not on my phone.
Oh,
And
okay.
I don't like StreamYards for that reason, but you always insist on doing it on StreamYards for some reason, because you
Um,
know how OBS works, right?
yeah, I do, but I thought it's just easier if I'm going to do a stream with people to use StreamYard.
Yeah.
And when I'm solo streaming, I just use OBS because then it doesn't matter. Um,
Oh, because
because
you
I
want
mean,
to
it's
kick
easier to
people.
control people. You can let them in, kick them out, let them in, whatever. But
Mhm.
it's kind of awkward with the OBS. So I'm coming up to the end of my monthly limit anyway. So I thought, well, I'll just finish it off in case it turns out to be a long stream. I don't know.
Yeah, because it's 20 hours a month, right?
Yeah. And it sort of sounds superficially reasonable, but of course it's totally inadequate for the addicts.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, and streaming is quite addictive. I remember, like, if I am watching some streams, sometimes it's very difficult just yes, to put them away because you're already like sort of invested in a topic. And then even though it's not always very interesting, you tend to just keep watching. And yeah, that's not a good thing because it really prevents you from doing your social obligations. I remember like quite sometimes, like either it was with you or with OV, it's like on the phone, and my girlfriend was harassing me, please come to my house and stuff like that. And you're like, well, yeah, I was like delayed, and that was like an hour late, and I got really pissed off. And so it can really, it can really prevent your normal social life. And I was just looking at Luke's Ford stream, so he's basically streaming every night now, right?
I think he does it for company. So it's not really that he thinks he's doing it for anything else other than for company. I mean, he was admitting that he has no, real life relationships.
Yeah.
But the thing is, carry on.
Yeah, I wonder why. I mean,
No, but you think, look, I know that the more you stream, the less attractive you are as a prospective partner. I mean, is that a general rule like that, or maybe for men it's sort of for men it's the worst thing because I don't know. There's this thing about talkative men. I used to know a guy who just couldn't stop talking. I mean, I because I'm quite a good listener, I don't mind. But I was just thinking that's actually very unattractive in a man to talk all the time. And then of course then you lose your mystery. I mean, just as women can lose their mystery, men can also lose their mystery.
well, women who talk a lot also are not always the most attractive, especially if they don't listen. It's very unattractive. These people that get very anxious, like in social situations, and instead of shutting up, they just keep talking. And then say something really dumb or just continue to blather on about something that is not important. I tend to not like these people. And I don't think they're very attractive, especially like if we're talking about life partners. I like people that know when to shut up and also know when to listen. But yeah, so yeah, maybe it has something to do with it. But
yeah,
but
it's a nervous reflex, I suppose. Some people just gabble on because they think the silence would be awkward, and therefore they're trying to fill it in, and they end up saying silly things. I guess, but for men to do it, it's I guess for women you wonder, well, why are they like that? Because you'll end up blurting out things you don't mean to blurt out, and maybe it doesn't matter so much with women because people don't really listen to women, perhaps, but for men it matters a bit more.
Yeah, you can always say with a woman it's cute, right? I mean, she's nervous, it's cute, but for a man, it's sort of compromising his masculinity in a sense. And I think women are very perceptive to something like that. It's some kind of way of submitting. When a dog lays on its back, if you talk a lot, I mean, and the other person also has sort of the rings of the conversation. They can sort of steer and they can ask questions. It's sort of gamma behavior, I would say.
Yeah, it's sort of like, now I've got your attention, then you have to listen to all my crap, and it's kind of the same thing, and it doesn't progress. I understand that obviously if you're streaming, you have to talk, but it should be about something. I think I sort of feel that when I go through mine, it's like, well, is there some takeaway point, something you can, and I think that's quite important. Otherwise, you really are streaming to stop the loneliness from eating you up.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I've been listening to some of Brutus's streams. They've become quite interesting as of late. There's this whole sort of split between Brutus and some of his followers and the sort of Marcolette crowd, the National Socialist crowd, because he is basically saying there's no way you can rehabilitate Hitler, right? So let's just, I don't know, let's be white nationalists and be for Churchill. I thought that was interesting. And
Well, it doesn't have to be either or, does it? I mean that's so. Well, I mean, Churchill did lead the country to war. That it shouldn't have. Well, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that Churchill lost the British their empire. He was a warmonger, and in the end, the British didn't. They lost their empire, and he was a terrible war leader, and and maybe the British ought to understand where they went wrong. And when I was learning history, I still had history teachers who said, well, I still remember that they said, well, maybe Britain shouldn't have fought that war.
Really?
Yeah, and yeah, they said that.
That's interesting. I haven't heard many of my history teachers saying that. I have to say, and I studied history, so.
Yeah, and all the reasons, like, they were the British were nervous of America, they were nervous of Germany being a rising power, that kind of, and they knew at the time that it wasn't the official version that they were supposed to teach us.
Oh, interesting. But don't you think that the fact that there was a compromise, there was Munich, and there was peace in our time, and Hitler violated these agreements, and at some point, if you don't put a stop to it, he'll roll all over you, right? So there won't be anything left. So in a way, the decision to go to war was forced, or you can lay on your back and let yourself get fucked.
No, the other interpretation of the First and Second World War was that it was the second 30 years war, and it was saying that the First and the Second World War was really the same war with a long interval in between, but it was fought for the same reason by Britain in order to keep Germany down.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, then we come back to Thucydides, right? So, I mean, in the case of the Peloponnesian War, it was the Spartans who acted first, who started the campaign. Mm-hmm. But this was only after a lot of provocations and a lot of trying to a lot of times when they were still compromising. But at some point, you do have to. Have to put a red line in the sand, because otherwise somebody will roll all over you, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can say that you're being bullied when in fact you're the one who stuck your oar in where it wasn't required, because there were times when the British just stayed aloof from all the wars of unification on the European continent. We all know that the Germans reached as far as Paris in 1870, and there was a Paris Commune. Paris was under siege. Britain didn't lift a finger, and then suddenly in 1914 it decided that it had some long-standing agreement to protect Belgian neutrality. And it wasn't that at all. It was the Berlin to Baghdad Railway, and they couldn't bear the idea of the, I suppose, the.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay, but you don't buy.
I don't believe in that interpretation. No.
Okay, but then I think the further in time we go, the more sanctified that particular version of history becomes, and then you really can't challenge it anymore.
No, I can, because otherwise the war would have probably been fought out not in Europe, but in the Middle East, right? So there have been a lot of proxy wars between different powers. Look even at Russia or Turkey or Russia and the United States. at the moment that are effectively proxy wars fought by others for them. Or
okay, but I didn't get the point. Your point about the Middle East, that it would have been fought in the Middle East. The First World War would have been fought
yeah,
in the
if it
Middle
was
East.
really
What do you mean by that?
only if it were only about the Baghdad Railroad, yeah, I think so.
Well, it was never built, was it? So there was no.
Well, I mean that only strengthens the point, right? I mean, it's never built. How important was it really to make
Well, it
that
was
war happen?
important enough for Britain to feel that it must destroy Germany.
Why? I mean, they had plenty of disputes with the French about with colonial affairs, right? They had this meeting in, where was it? Sudan? I forgot where it was exactly, where they sort of carved up Africa as well. Sorry, in the 1880s or somewhere. And that didn't lead to a war.
Yeah, but it was Germany that was a continental power after unification. It was bigger than France.
Yeah, but it was
When
bigger in
before
Europe.
German unification, it was France that was the dominant continental power.
Yeah, true, but the French colonial empire was much more, was much bigger.
Yeah, and Germany said, well, we missed out in the scramble for colonies, but we deserve our place in the sun, and we will take, and by God, we will take it. And you
Yeah,
can't stop us.
yeah, but then you forget the whole situation, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, the nationalisms that were developing there, how it was falling apart, the whole alliance system, how it worked, the threat of German power rising in Europe itself, because it was a unity now, and it had a lot of industrial output. Could have endangered not just France, but also the balance of power in Europe. So at some point, Germany would have been dictating terms to everybody.
Well, maybe Europe would have been run better if the Germans had been doing it. And as for anti-Semitism, it was endemic anyway. I mean, it's endemic in Christian Europe. This thing. So if you'd say, it was because what Hitler did to the Jews, I think, well, Britain in its own, there was the Edict of Expulsion in the 1200s, 1290, I think it was, and so I don't think it was Germany was being especially evil, really, when other countries had already done. Russia had done it. England had done it. I don't think the French did it, but there were sort of acts of persecution and Talmud burning over the centuries. So I mean, no Christian country was can be said to be not anti-Semitic.
Well, I mean, there were periods in time when Jewish people could live in some European countries quite easily. Their religion was
after the
respected.
French Revolution, wasn't it?
Well,
Jewish emancipation happened after.
yeah, no, but even before that, look at my own country, the Netherlands. Jewish people lived in minority communities. Of course, there were also always minorities, so they didn't always have the same rights. But their life was much better than the Catholics or that of other Protestant dissident sects. So the Jewish question in Europe is confusing. I think actually Jewish people were treated much better than other minorities. Like, we don't know of any
Muslims, not even allowed to be Muslim.
Muslims were expelled.
But Jews, because they're only a little tribe, not that many, and you're used to them. That's why maybe you were more accepted because they've been around.
Sure. But all the heretics as well. We don't know anything about Arianism anymore. Arianism was wiped out, the Cathars or the Albigensians.
I don't. Perhaps you'd like to tell us a bit more. Those are unfamiliar names to me.
Yeah, so I think it was in the 14th century, probably. If I get this correct, the Albigensian Crusade. So in France, there was a heresy coming up, and they were inspired by Gnostic Christianity. And the Catholic Church, and together with the French king, tried to root it out, and they were very successful. But this resulted in a long campaign. Have you ever heard of Carcassonne, that big castle in France, in the Pyrenees?
Did you say Picasso?
Carcassonne.
No.
And the Montségur. There were two castles taken, or more castles taken, but they're famous examples of castles taken by the Cathars, and they were burned at the stake and killed, all of them.
For what? I don't even know for what.
Well, they had specific ideas. I don't remember specifically what they actually believed, but they were Gnostics. Maybe also I think it had to do something with transubstantiation. Also, if the body of Christ was really on the Eucharist or something, what was it?
Yeah, did it really turn into the flesh of Christ and all that?
Yeah.
So what century was this again?
I think it's the 14th century or the 15th, but I'm gonna look it up for you.
Oh good.
Cathars. Crusade.
The history of Christian doctrine is quite interesting, I think, because of so many changes it makes. I mean, what you said reminded me of the Book of Common Prayer. And if you look at the introduction, it's such a long introduction, and it was basically saying, we keep changing it because we couldn't agree on the form of words, and there were so many, underlying political and religious reasons why, the wording was so much in dispute, blah blah blah, and I thought it was quite interesting.
So the Albigensian Crusade was launched in 1209. So it's the 13th century.
And this was the Catholics doing what?
Yeah, the Catholics crushing down,
the Gnostics.
The Gnostic Cathars. Mainly in France, I remember, but I think they were also in Italy. Yeah, but I mean, Christian history is full of these kinds of little crusades about very minor differences of doctrine.
Well, yes, because we were talking about Aquinas the other day, weren't we? And it was like all this convoluted theory was cooked up just to explain why why Christians couldn't have a simpler faith as Jews and Muslims did. It's like, Muslims say oneness of God. Yeah, we can't see him and whatever, but Christians are supposed to believe that Christ is God, and this goes back to the Council of Nicaea, and even then there was this divergence of opinion about how divine Christ was allowed to be. So the Trinitarian said he is as he is as divine as the Holy Spirit and God Himself. And the Arians said, no, he's just a little bit divine, but, nothing like God or the Holy Spirit. But for some reason, the Trinitarians won. So ever since then, they persecuted everyone else who disagreed with them, because I guess they were, top dog first at the top of the tree.
Yeah, but the Muslims also had their fair share of persecutions. Have you ever heard of the Maula?
Nope.
The Maula, that was interesting. So there were people called the Mutazilis. Have you ever heard of the Mutazilis?
They were practically saying that you don't have to believe in God or something.
Well, not entirely. It's more complicated than that. So they believed in the absolute unity of God, but they thought that the Quran was created instead of uncreated. It is very like minor, also weird doctrinal questions about who can interpret the Quran. Do we need the hadiths as well, the literature of the companions of the prophets to interpret what is in the Quran, for example? And that also turned into a major shit show. And at some point, Caliph al-Mamun, he asked of his or any Islamic scholar to endorse this view. And there was one guy in particular who really didn't like it, which was Ahmed ibn Hanbal. And he is now the founder of the Hanbali school of jurisprudence. But there was a lot of persecution at the time. So this already started, I think, in the 9th century, if I'm not correct. No, in the 8th century already. Yeah. That's where it started. But also, I mean, you had these different groups like the Kharijites, the Shiites, that, of course, were the party of Ali. There were massive battles being fought. So Islamic history is also full of persecution, and it didn't end there. It also Islamic persecution lasts to this day. Look at the Ahmadiyyas in Pakistan, for example, but also other groups are victims of this.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there plenty of different sects in Islam, but Christianity is more schismatic simply because there's so much that isn't clearly stated, and there is this theory that the New Testament was some cobbled together thing, or that it was the construction of the propaganda department of the Romans who were creating new religions all the time. Or that was quite an interesting documentary about it.
Yeah, I don't think we know enough about Islamic persecution to actually compare the two. There's been a lot of persecution in Islam. Famously, Ibn Rushd, Averroes, the famous philosopher, was persecuted. Ibn Sina or Avicenna also was persecuted, but also very conservatives like Ahmed ibn Taymiyyah was also persecuted. So if you don't think that Islamic history is full of persecution and the fire platoon, then you're mistaken. It's just
I don't not think that. I'm just saying it's not. There's not so much of it as there is in Christianity. But then, of course, I wouldn't know that much about Islam. But I'm saying, if something is written clearly, people won't be disputing its meaning. I mean, this is a kind of first rule of legal draftsmanship. You express yourself clearly, all the terms of the contract, and say what should happen if a certain predictable situation should arise, and you provide for that in the contract, or you deal with it. But it's only when so many things are unstated and not said clearly that people kind of go crazy with the ambiguity of it. And
yeah, but it's not in case of legal matters that the controversy was that much. It's more because of questions of creed or akida that Muslims eventually fought their wars against each other. So also in Christianity, it was about transubstantiation. Yeah, well, these sort of
these are political. Though.
Yeah, no, but they're theological discussions that turn political.
Okay, I mean, the Sunni Shia thing was the Persian saying, we just want to be a little different from the Ottomans with whom we are in competition.
No, because the Persians were Sunni first. Only in 1507.
Under Shah Abbas,
under Shah Abbas, it became Shiite.
Yeah.
The Shiites were in different parts. They were also in Khorasan, but they were also, for example, in Egypt. The Fatimid Empire was Shiite, and they also did their persecution against the Sunnis when they took power.
Yeah, so they had their own, particular political reasons to, concentrate on certain doctrinal issues and pick fights with each other over that, and then to keep their populace, different to the people they're fighting with, just for I guess reasons of recognition. So if I have my men and you have your men and we want to fight each other, it would be useful to have them wear different uniforms so they recognize each other when they're supposed to be fighting each other. Maybe that's just that's what it's all about. And also, for this transubstantiation thing, I know Catholics are supposed to literally believe that the wafer turns into Christ's flesh when it, is in the mouth of the believer, while the CLV just thinks it's, we do that because we want to incorporate this Catholic ritual, but we don't really believe that the wafer literally turns into Christ's flesh once it gets popped into the mouths of the Christian in church. And they have to do these sort of little things that I think are necessary to keep them apart. So I was talking about the Book of Common Prayer a little earlier, and one of the things that surprised me about it was that it still blesses the Holy Catholic Church. And I was a little surprised because I thought, oh, break from Rome. They'll be doing the opposite of blessing the Holy Catholic Church. But I think it was because of all these sort of centuries of saying in church and getting the congregation who won't know anything, and they'll be used to words being said in a certain way, and they'll definitely notice if you don't include it anymore. And I think Henry VIII's idea was that he just wanted himself to be leader, head of the Church of England, but he didn't want anything to be different in the way of the ritual or the prayers, because it would just upset the people. So
that's true. That's true. But in that respect, Anglicanism is very different from the other Protestant sects, because you had the time of iconoclasm, like all these images were being smashed. These churches were stripped. There was a lot of violence at the time.
Yeah, I mean, there's even now this thing called Anglo-Catholic, which means that they just get to keep their ritual, but the loyalty is to the monarch. So people do fight about how their rituals are, and even over certain wordings of prayers or whatever. I mean, they just do get very upset about it. Even if it's under the same authority. So Vatican II, they're still going on about it. So I guess everything is controversial because politics is really religion, and so many ideas are symbolic of certain I don't know, certain beliefs that your enemy or you might hold, and it's not even, and a lot of it is only half understood, I think. So and yeah, I mean, in the last few days, I was just thinking how totally traumatized people are. Well, I'm thinking of white people, really. It's like they're really messed up in the head.
I don't know. I think they're just demoralized.
No. It's the whole thing about really hating God. I mean, I just bumped into this Catholic Canadian, and I thought, oh no, not another one of them. And he really hates God, and he and he hates religion, and he wants to destroy it. And it's just really sort of crazy, violent things that he'd say. And then it turns out, of course, that he's ex-Catholic. and so you get so many of these ex-Catholics just sort of.
Yeah, but it's understandable, because religion used to exercise so much power onto human lives, And when there was an escape, people really didn't want to go back. I mean, they're probably from the 60s. I know, like my parents, my mom came from a very religious background, and she doesn't want to go back because it was so oppressive.
Mm.
So can you imagine that you're from a family of, like, I don't know, like 10, constantly talking about hellfire and shit? That is not very fun. And Muslims and Christians indoctrinate their children with fear still to this day. So I can imagine that people who get out of it are very resentful of their
Yeah,
upbringing.
because they feel they've been tricked. And then, and then there's this additional layer of white people who not only they themselves have been tricked, but generations of their ancestors for centuries have been tricked. And it's like, for Christianity, they were never asked. They were all forcibly converted, and if they even thought of leaving the church at all, they would be persecuted.
Yeah,
So
but the same applies to Islam. Like if you are a heretic, the punishment is death, according to the most mainstream accounts of the religion.
well, some Muslims have said, well, it just means that if you're a traitor, then we're going to kill you, and you do kill traitors, don't you? Treason is still, in theory, or was a capital crime until fairly recently in the UK. So, but I think you see a lot of Hindus and Buddhists. It's like they were never forced into it, because the whole thing about Christianity is that there is this you're supposed to believe in the doctrine of the Trinity. So, and I know that in church services they kind of make you recite it, and you go along with it just to join in, as I found myself doing. And it's like, yeah, we got you to recite the doctrine of the Trinity, the Nicene Creed, and it's like you affirmed it, didn't you? You just affirmed it when you went to church, and even though a lot of people just say it without knowing what it meant. As I myself did, for ages, until I realized its significance. Oh, he's dropped out. I'll just wait for him to come back again, I guess. Or if he doesn't, I might just go to bed. What are you saying, Anita? Okay. You know what? I think I'll just go to bed. I'm sure one of you can start a stream, and you can carry on from there. But I think I'll just go to bed now, because I have a few things to do tomorrow as well. So thank you for coming by, and I'll speak to you again soon. Thanks, people. Bye.